This talk is part of a series within the Talks program that Maddie and I have a lot of fun putting together because it's called Crosscuts, and what we basically do is pair filmmakers and artists from across the New York Film Festival lineup who we think have, sort of surprising, maybe unexpected resonances in their bodies of work. And I feel like we had a real brainwave when we thought of pairing Alexandre and Mark. How many of you have seen Alexandre's film Dry Leaf, which is in Currents? Okay. And how many of you have seen Rose of Nevada? Okay, obviously it hasn't screened yet except for the press. So I'll try not to reveal too much, but both films and both your bodies of work, I realized, have some really amazing sort of parallels. And I want to get into all of that, but I thought I'd start by asking you both about some of your formative influences, so some of your early cinematic or otherwise artistic experiences that have found their way into your work now, because you both have very distinctive original styles, and I'm curious what kind of fed into that.
I had my early cinematic experiences was watching Hollywood movies, which I did kind of brainlessly but joyfully as a kid. And then I saw a film called The Garden by Derek Jarman when I was probably about, 18. Maybe a bit young. I'm going to say a bit younger to make me sound a bit more intelligent. I was a bit younger than that. And I think it was the first film that I'd seen that made me think there was somebody had made the film and there was a filmmaker behind the camera. And because the film starts with shots of Jarman and his team filming with Super 8 cameras, and that inspired me to go and get a Super 8 camera, and I haven't really sort of looked back since then. A few deviations along the way, but I've always been interested in films that draw attention to filmmaking rather than trying to hide the form. So I think that film still feeds into what I do now, even though you would never look at my work and look at his work and think there's any kind of real connection. But in my mind, there's a kind of formalist connection.
Well, hello, and good to sit here with you guys. I think the things which inspire me, or generally I think inspire someone who makes something, mostly get invisible through the work of a person who is inspired. And luckily, I guess, it's not completely invisible, but somehow I think it should dissolve in a way that if something is so clear that we can really see it and say, okay, this is this, then maybe it's too much. So for me also, I even sometimes try to maybe repeat something or redo, but in the end, then I look at it, it's completely different. And maybe when I was very, very young, it somehow bothered me because I was thinking, I can't do it. But now I think it's a big luck because it means it goes some other direction. No matter how much I try to make a film like Nanni Moretti, it will never become something like this. And that's where somehow I feel to be lucky in that, because it makes a work easier, because I can easily plan or wish to redo something somehow with a kind of a guarantee that it will not become a repetition. And for some time already, I'm kind of not scared to get really, really close to some works which I really love. Maybe one day it will break and there will be a film and everyone will say, come on, this is...
But what are some of those works?
We've seen this already, but who knows?
What are some of those works?
So many. I mean, Nanni Moretti I mentioned, and it's hard. I mean, If we talk about films, I think every filmmaker you love is part of you, no? And for me, I think the first film which I started to repeatedly watch was maybe Blue Velvet. When I first saw it, and then watched it again the same day, and then it was maybe years of not sometimes completely watching it, but at least rewatching the beginning or some things every day. This was for me, like in the cinematic way, maybe the first film which, and now it's still, I think, if I make a ranking, maybe I've seen this the most because, yeah.
Another film that's had a massive influence on me is Big Wednesday, John Milius's 1978 surf masterpiece. And you just reminded me, I was interviewed about it not that long ago, and I was giving an interview, and there was a moment in the interview where I forgot that I didn't make that film.
You had internalized this idea that it was your film.
Yeah, and
oh
I've done so much research, because there's so little material out there about the making of it. It's like anecdotal, but there's not many behind-the-scenes photos and stuff. And I've sort of researched. One day I will make the definitive coffee table book of this film, and I've researched all of the locations and everything. And I was talking about it, and I was talking about these locations, and I almost said, yeah. And we went up. You know, we didn't film it in Malibu in the end. We went up, and I thought I was 18 months old when that film was made, living on the other side of the planet. But I was so caught up with it that for a moment.
I mean, there is something Lynchian about that. Yeah.
I think
that's so funny.
There are films which, I don't know, like inspire you, but at least for me, then they scare me. Like, for example, if I see Husbands, I don't think about making something like this. I just I don't even try. Not it's because better or worse something, but it hasn't or any for Cassavetes, for example, film. When I watching it, I'm not thinking about making something in that way. I'm more like, but when I watch, for example, Lynch, while watching it, I'm thinking about what should I do. But it's not for me a thing of ranking which is better or worse. It's more like inviting. I think for everyone it's different. I'm sure there are people who watch Cassavetes and think like, okay, I want to make it as well. I love them both equally. Yeah.
What about influences outside of cinema?
Mine, everything goes back to a poem for me, a Houseman poem from a Shropshire lad, which is I think every film I make is my cinematic interpretation of that poem. It's really as simple as that.
You remember some lines from it?
I remember it all, yeah. I'm going to forget it now.
Sorry.
Into my heart. Well, it's the poem that's at the end of Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout. Into my heart an air that kills from yon far country blows. What are those blue remembered hills? What fires, what farms, what spires are those? That is the land of lost content. I see it shining plain, the happy highways where I went and cannot come again. Which is, in Cornwall we have a word, and the Welsh have it as well in the Cornish language, it's hireth, which hasn't got an exact English translation, but it means the eternal search for home, which might not be a physical place, it might be a feeling, it might be people, it could be anything, but it's this idea of searching for home. And in my film that's going to premiere in a really soon, that's kind of
I was just
that's kind
about
of
to say
the
that's
plot. Spoiler.
That's sort of like a perfect synopsis for the film almost. So that's really beautiful. And for you, Sandro?
Well, thank you for this. It was beautiful. I think it's also kind of a blend between poetry or also just literature, but never in a way to retell the stories, but more in a language or feelings. It is giving us, I don't know, when I went to school, my grades in Georgian language, or it was always really bad in all subjects, but there especially because I can't memorize poems. Like
I won't ask you to recite anything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was a bit afraid, but no, like really, but it's. I think it's so related to filmmaking, much more than like stories, because often. Like that there are, for example, you make a film because you read the story, but I think what you say, it's so dear to me, and I really can feel it, because a poem can be such an inspiration for a film. And I often have problems with when people make films with the short stories or the bigger ones, which I like, because I really want them to stay unvisualized. And there are so many stories I want to film, but I will never do it because I know there are other people who don't want these characters to have a specific face and so on. But with poetry it's different. It's as you say, you can dedicate all your life to one poem and live with it, and it will be an eternal inspiration.
I think the best thing to do is, what I'm always looking for is a really shit book to adapt that's got a really great idea but hasn't been realized as a book. And so you take the good idea and give it a second life as a film. I remember saying to my agents, they said, "What the literary department of my agency saying, what do you want to do?" And I said, I want a really shit book, and they were offering me stuff they were representing. I said, I want a really shit book. And I said that, I said a shit book that I can that's got a good idea that I can make. And I went on and on telling them, and then it was on a Zoom call, and then this literary agent looked at me and said, "Mark, we don't represent shit books." So you got to look for them in airports, I think. Yeah.
Well, you're never going to get it now that this is going to be on the record, so anytime you try to option a book, they'll know that it's a shit book.
That's a very good point. I was joking.
Yeah, jokes. The other thing that came to mind when I was kind of rewatching both your films is just how closely your filmmaking is tied to a sense of place. Honestly, the poem that you just recited in many ways summarizes Dry Leaf too. The search for a home that is not a single place. And so I was wondering if you could talk about, Mark, your films are always set in Cornwall, are kind of rooted in the area's history, culture, folklore. Can you just talk about the experience of growing up there and what is important for you to, I guess, distill onto the screen about life in Cornwall?
None of it's important. Hello. Well, it is important. It's important for me and for you, but really the important thing is authenticity. And I think I can own, and I say this a lot, the only place in the world that I can portray authentically on screen is Cornwall. Now that doesn't mean that then the stories are essentially Cornish, and some people might argue, some things may be perceived as inaccessible story-wise, or the context might be inaccessible or a barrier sometimes, but hopefully the story is universal enough that people can relate to the themes within my work, but the setting has to be specific to Cornwall, because it's the only place I can portray authentically. And I couldn't set I love being in New York and I love being in Manhattan, but I couldn't write a film here, because it would be guesswork and it would be awful. It would be like all of these other filmmakers who turn up in New York not understanding the place and make shit films. And I think the audiences are really sophisticated, and they recognize something that is phony. And they recognize something that's authentic. And it might not be, the film starts and the audience don't go, well, this feels authentic, I'm going to go with this. But there's something unconscious. Well, it's like watching your film. I don't know, I know very little about the country, but straight away I'm so caught up with it because I just know it's so authentic, and you don't have to have, you don't have to have been to Cornwall or even heard of Cornwall, but an audience will pick something will pick out something that's fake.
Can I ask you what you think you mean by authenticity?
No.
I mean, you just said it's something we feel and maybe cannot like articulate as a viewer, but I do think that it's true that both your films have this, maybe for me, I would call it a sense of specificity. And for me, that feeling is that while watching your films, I know that there are things that I don't know that are in the film. Like, there are certain films where everything is kind of laid out for the viewer. And in your film, I know that it's so rich with detail that I'm not picking up on all the details. There's more beyond what I can see or make sense of. But I'm just curious, maybe even from a formal point of view, what that means for you.
I think, like you say, you don't have to pick up on everything. But I think there's like an intuitive plausibility. If there's some things in there that you recognize, then you can fill in the gaps, and you don't need to understand every sort of detail. But I think from my point of view, the authenticity is just that I'm portraying a place as I feel it and experience it. And in Cornwall, we really suffer from people coming in and making films and using it as a backdrop. And because we're a rural, coastal community, we're also a shortcut for stupid characters, which is really simple. It's a really easy... It's easier than writing complex characters.
Right.
Just give somebody an accent from the West Country to UK, and there'll be an assumption that person is automatically stupid. And it's great. It saves pages of script. And it's always... And I remember I said this 3 years ago when I was here, and I said it 6 years ago when I was here. The stories were always the same. It's a Cornish setting, but you'd have a character who would be very sophisticated and come from an urban setting, and they would visit a rural or coastal setting, and with a brief interaction with the simple folk of the community, they would understand what real life was about, and then they would slightly change their behavior and their view of the world, and then they would return to their sophisticated urban life a better person. And the thickos in Cornwall would still be wandering around, sleeping with their own cousins and all that kind of stuff that they, that is that rich background. And so for me, it's all about bringing those people to the foreground to create the authentic place that I live in, which is so different and exactly the same as every other community on the planet.
That's very beautifully put. Sandro, your last film was so much about Tbilisi, the culture and the landscape and the food. I mean, it just made me want to visit so bad. And then this film is a little different. It goes out into the countryside, but also just has such a strong sense of place.
Yeah, I think for me it's also every time, there is a place where you live, like an apartment. And that's where I know everything. Like I know every spoon and every corner and every dusty place, which maybe has to be cleaned, but I don't do it, and so on. I know everything, no? At least I think so. Maybe, I'm sure there are some secrets, but I know a lot. So it's a space for me where I can work, which I can film very comfortably. And then the further I go, the less it gets. Like my neighborhood, I'm still quite comfortable. I know all the dogs and people and so on, but still, and it gets less and less and less, but still I think, at least in Tbilisi, where I grew up, I know I have a feeling, because my grandma lives there and I have friends who have kids, so I know what is going on behind curtains where older people live, or how do people live who have kids, and so on, because also in Tbilisi, most of my close friends are not the same, don't do films, or some of them don't do arts, some of them are very different professions. So I know how people with different professions or different interests live. And I know friends of my parents who have also completely different lives. So I have, of course, not a complete, but quite wide place to see, and it gives me not only possibility but also kind of courage to talk about it. But and I feel confident. when I leave Tbilisi, then it gets hard because even though it's okay, I'm Georgian and it's Georgia, because every village is a universe for itself, and it was really hard doing dry leaf, coming to these places, and being this. You are kind of alien, and even in a friend's house, you are a stranger. But in a village, you are a complete stranger.
And you're an urbanite going to villages, so it's a particular dynamic. Yeah.
So that's why I think a place for me has a crucial meaning. I try to, if I go somewhere, I don't try to act like I act like an alien because that's how it is. But the more comfortable I feel, the more I'm near to my place. And I mentioned Nanni Moretti. He has in his film, in one of his films, he's returning home when his parents live, and there is one image. He looks down and he has this little red ball. He was playing with this the whole life, and he's just playing with it, and it goes to there is a TV standing on something, and this ball rolls to this corner, and he picks up, and it's really beautiful shot, and it's something. It's the whole life there, because since being 2, he was doing that, and this is for me feeling for a place when carpet has your footstep on it,
Similar to what Mark was saying, I'm wondering if there are like maybe cliched or common depictions of the places you've grown up around that, in a way, maybe even subconsciously, you're subverting in the way you film them.
When I started to be really interested in the place, in Tbilisi, for example, was when I left it. I think without that, I would always have had much more distance. The thing that I left to Germany to study, and for quite a long time, became for me a possibility to see it, to really love it, because I didn't love it before, and I really needed this distance to appreciate it and to start really feel for it, to miss it, but also to see it. And every time I was coming back there, it was a very mixed gaze of someone from there, but also from a stranger. And for me, it was a really important moment. I think it's crucial for art to have something in between, because
so again, like I keep thinking about how the two films came together in my mind, and now it's like the cracked pavements. There's so many shots that keep recurring, and I'm like, whose film was it? But one really sort of unifying character is that both of you are filmmakers who pay a lot of attention to materiality. We had a beautiful piece in Film Comment, actually, that came out yesterday by this critic, Imogen Sarah Smith, and she talked about your films and Levers by Rain Vermette, which is also in Currents, as films that treat the cinema screen not as a window, but as a terrain, which I thought was very appropriate. And so I want to ask about, your shooting formats. Mark, yesterday you told me if you weren't using celluloid, you might have used a Sony Ericsson. You both have this interest in a format that really emphasizes the mediation. We're not seeing the image like necessarily reality as it is, as like the 4K fetish of, capturing reality. So yeah, talk to me about your choice of formats.
I shoot everything on film, and it's partly an aesthetic thing, but it's not just an aesthetic thing. It's the workflow. I really embrace the limitations of shooting on film, and I don't say limitation as a negative. I mean it as a creative motor, really. To be told you can't do something, or or be told you can do something but within very strict parameters is very freeing, I think. Because if I could do anything, I would just do nothing, because I'd be constantly thinking about what I could do and never actually doing anything. So with the budgets I work at the moment, we have a certain amount of film, which dictates how I work. I don't shoot any coverage. We shoot one take and one safety, which means the editing becomes simpler and more creative, because quite often I'll get into the edit suite and realize I haven't got enough shots to create the scene, so then I have to start looking at other stuff that I've got, and quite often that's objects and textures.
And by other stuff, you mean just stuff you filmed before that you just sort of have, or?
Quite often it's stuff I've shot on the beginning or an end of a roll before I'm loading the camera or changing the, and I don't know why I'm filming it at the time. I'll just spin the camera around before I start working with the actors, and maybe just film, a close-up of a bottle of water on the table, which then when I get in the edit becomes incredibly helpful.
Like Nani Moretti's Ball, it becomes something like that.
Yeah, and it does, and I wait for the reviews to come out, and then the critics tell me what it means, and then I claim that was always my intention. But I do think it must have been, because there was some reason I picked that particular object.
The unconscious has its mysteries.
It does, yeah, and you've got to leave. My good friend, the filmmaker Andrew Cotting, said, and I think he was quoting Ian Sinclair, he said, you leave yourself open to the angels of happenstance, and if the more open you are, the more they'll give you.
Sounds good.
or pretentious.
Any quotes you want to pull out of thin air?
No, I was just thinking, like, what is more right, like when we talk, that I talk to you, or like this. I was not sure, but no, really.
Whatever.
I'll try like this. No, like maybe some 15 years ago, I went to an exhibition in Berlin of a German photographer, Marianne Breslauer. Just a coincidence. We didn't have anything to do, so we went to see it. But for me, it became really like an important. Okay, this better. It feels like.
Whatever.
It became really an important day, because she has made really, really beautiful pictures, but watching one of them, which was captivating, I was like, wow, this is so good. But then, like, realizing there is nothing special like in this picture, really zero, no composition, nothing, no character which could be doing something strange. I don't know, like, it's really impossible to explain. But it was a really long time. It was doing something with me, and then I thought it should be something the person who was making this picture was feeling in the moment, and it's transporting this, no? Because what we see, if you describe the picture, there's nothing. But still the picture, and then, like, I started to think, like, how can a picture, like, which tools can a picture transport, no? These feelings of someone holding a camera. And I think in the case of a film, we call it grain, no? Something which is which doesn't have a shape, but it creates something which is still part of texture. Yeah. I don't know, which captures a moment of someone inner moment of someone making a picture. And that's because anyone can make the same picture. In any phone today, everyone has maybe composition-wise much better pictures than that. But I think this person had something huge going on in her in that moment, and she had the possibility to reflect this on this picture, and it happened. So I think the materiality is the most crucial thing in filmmaking. And I mean, with the film, we know that it happens because we have a proof for that, and now we hope for pixels that they can transport it as well.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I think maybe I told you this. I just wanted to cry a lot while watching your film, and I didn't quite understand why these pixelated images of fields were so emotional. I mean, they were just images of green fields, and it just captured a sense of loss in a way, and a sense of like searching for something beyond the frame. So I think, yeah, I really understand what you're saying. Both of your films are also quite mysterious and don't provide easy answers. And in fact, the mysteries are sometimes like red herrings. You might be watching expecting that in the end there will be the answer, and sometimes they sort of curve you. And that made me wonder what your scripting process is like. How do you put together the scripts? And both of you, I believe, wrote, directed, filmed, and edited, like shot and edited your films. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, where did the story come together in the scripting process or edit or?
For me, it's different. Like Dry Leaf was a script. There was a script which, by the end, we didn't really follow. For the middle part, the beginning and the end, which I think is the most fictional parts of the film, it was scripted, but still, I think what matters and what maybe is the most emotional part of the film, maybe is the last moments when it's finishing. It was not scripted as it is in the film, because it became also part that we met some people who became part of this film, and which was
like the villagers that Irakli meets, those people, or
no, like I mean really the ending when he meets this woman. Because I really was not sure how to end the film, because I didn't, at some point I didn't like how I wrote it, and then I was waiting for something, and then we met her, and then she became like really important part of the film. An
angel of happenstance.
Yeah, but it's it depends. Like I really love writing, because it can be really, I don't know, comfortable work compared to filming. No, I always because, for example, I love cake and coffee and like cinnamon bun, and I can connect this with my work of writing, and then writing is also so unlimited. You really write anything. Maybe later you have to give something away, but still in that moment it's there, and you can be alone, or you can be in some place which you really like. You can't always film in place you like or you are comfortable, but with writing, why not? So it's for me, it's also really, it maybe sounds silly, but really connected with some delicious things.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, that writing I find writing very difficult, but there's a freedom to it, and there's a comfort, and it doesn't have the same terror attached to it as being out shooting, which also serves its purpose as well. But to answer your question, the script is almost exactly as the film is, because I don't allow anybody to improvise or go off the script, because I don't record any location sound. So none of the actors are recorded on location, and I don't record a guide track. So if they improvise, when I get to the edit, I'll have no idea what they're saying. Although I have, through this process, I've become quite a good lip reader. But I don't allow them to go off the script. But also, you know, I do shoot stuff that isn't in the script, like the inanimate objects and textures and stuff. So then I think there's a certain amount of writing that happens in the edit as well. And I think that writing is editing, and editing is writing. They're the same thing, really. When you're writing, all you're doing is editing with imagined rushes. and then when you're editing with real rushes, you know, so they're not dissimilar. And then in the middle you have this few weeks of absolute terror when you're having to, you know, when the clock's ticking and the money's being spent. But either side of that, you have this kind of, you're always near a cup of tea and a piece of cake and in the warm, and that's the, you know, where you're not spending lots of money, you know, so there's that great comfort.
To go back to the kind of this idea of mystery, I mean, both films, and I think this applies to your, you know, both of your other films too, you take these fable-like or sometimes genre-inspired premises. So, you know, Sandra, in your previous film, this kind of idea of like a body swap, and then here, the missing person. Your film obviously is drawing upon these time travel, sci-fi tropes, but then takes them in very different directions. So you kind of use these tropes to kind of play with us, I feel like, and subvert them in very interesting ways. Can you talk about that, this attraction to the fairy tale, fable, folk tale, you know, the great kind of myths of culture?
Well, for me, it's a great question. I hope I will never find an answer to it. What makes a film? Like when does some collection of images become a film? Because, like, of course there are no rules, and I think for every filmmaker it's a process of understanding it. Like what is a clip and what is a film? Like why there are these two words, and why not every 10 images put together are films? Or maybe they are, but at least I believe that we should know the difference. At least I should know the difference. And at some point I thought that maybe every filmmaker is thinking about it and is inventing his or her rules. So I thought I should have mine. Like at what point can I call something I filmed a film? Or where should I begin? And one of the elements for this, for me, I thought back then, is to have a story. The films I really love very often are very far from stories, or like not story related. And I think my films are also not very story related, but still I thought it for me, there is the rule that it has to have a beginning and end. And it's like to have a border, to set some certain rules. It starts here, it ends there, and then be free in this space. And it's also like it's a very interesting process of understanding what these borders can be, because I think without borders, without rules, any game is really not interesting. You can't play football if you don't say from here it's an out. No, it really becomes absurd. So for me, this is this kind of a thing that I make a circle and say, okay, this is the story, and inside happens what is really interesting for me, because the story it's a setup, but the game starts after.
Very Godardian, a beginning, middle, and end, but maybe not in that order.
It depends. Like I think because it's more like a formal choice, and to follow a story of, I don't know, like dryly, if someone is starting to search and finds in the end,
Right.
it's better to keep it simple.
I think for me, I like films that are narratively very simple but thematically very complicated. But then the paradox is, some people say to me that my films are narratively quite complicated, but I always think they're quite straightforward. And I worry, you know, when I'm working, because I do quite a lot of the work on my own, when they're finished, I just think, oh, this is so obvious and so straightforward and so dull. And then and then we normally have the cast and crew screening where even people who've worked on the film come out and go, what the fuck is going on? And that's, I find that quite reassuring, because hopefully it's somewhere between those two things. But I'm motivated as an audience member who makes films, and as an audience member, I'm terrible at following the plot of films. I like simple stories that are thematically complicated, so that's my motive. That's the type of films that I try to make. But it seems that sometimes my narratives are quite complicated as well. But I'm trying to be clear.
Sound is also very central to both your filmmaking, and in your case, Mark, you recorded the sound yourself, you did the score yourself. In your case, your brother Georgi did the sound and score, and they're such an essential aspect of both films. Can you talk about your approach to sound?
Yeah, I mean, it's like writing. You know, my approach to sound is I like to do it in a controlled environment, and I don't like location sound recording, because it's always the thing that's problematic, I find. So I now work and I don't worry about sound at all, and I come back to it at the end. Or that's what I started out doing, thinking I'll come back to the sound at the end, and it's increasingly become really the starting point for me. So a lot of the sound I'll start collecting before we've even shot, and then quite often it will be quite dislocated from the actual places we're filming, and then it elevates the work for me. You know.
For Rose of Nevada, what were some of those sounds?
Some of the score, some of the sounds of the boat, the creaks and the impacts. A lot of that was me just with somebody who came round to my studio before I started working on the film reminded me the other day that he came round and just walked into the studio, and I was just hitting a nail that I'd hammered into a piece of wood with another piece of metal into a tape loop, and it was creating this sort of sonic kind of impact, which became the heart of the score of the film later on.
And
well, I don't know. For me, sound is something very complicated. It's something I don't know. My brain is not working in sound terms when I'm filming, and I think also later because especially if I make pictures myself, like in Dry Leaf, it's kind of a jealousy to give everything to what we see, and the rest is because I think it works also like this. So if you let me do it maybe as I wish without anyone around, maybe I would leave it completely silent and then use music in some parts. But luckily there are people who sometimes advise some things, and then we use sound, and it becomes so important because to make a silent film, and this is always my kind of aim to make silent films where you hear things, but it should feel like a film from silent film era at least. And I try to use sounds which give this feeling of there is some sound, but it has a character, but it has a sometimes very random character or very repetitive, as it's put there, sometimes on loop, just to be something. So it's, and I think if there is a long period of sound which is the same for 10 minutes, for example, at some point, when you're watching it, it disappears for you. It's there, and you are not crazy. You have sound under your image, but no one is feeling it anymore. It's like a sound of air conditioning or something, which is there, very present, but at some point it disappears.
We have to let Mark go for the premiere of Rose of Nevada. So, yes. Thank you, Mark. Yes. But Sandra, maybe you can stick around for a few audience questions?
Of course.
All right. Anyone have any questions? If you do, raise your hand, and mic runner will come to you with the mic. So.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what's it like to work with families, like people that are so close to you, and also your film is also very personal, very close to you, like stories-wise. So like working with people that are really close to you, for me, sometimes is annoying and hard, but I'm wondering what's your experience with that? Thank you.
It depends. I think it can be hard, definitely. But also, I'm quite sure it's not harder than working with people who are not family. And I think it's always one case to case. It's never the same. But for me, especially with Dry Leaf, it was really crucial, I guess, that there were people who support me in a way that no other person can do. I mean, there are some close friends and family who will wait 10 hours for me to come up with idea and won't ask 10 times like, okay, what are we doing? And of course
they're not unionized, right?
Sorry?
Your dad is not a union actor.
No, and I'm part of filmmakers union in Georgia, so if he has a problem, he should come to me, so I'm safe.
Well-oiled system, yeah. But actually, can I ask, why did you cast your dad in this film? What made you think that was the right choice?
I think it was a right choice, and I was quite sure about it from the beginning. He was one of the first decisions while making this film. I think on one hand he has a presence which is kind of important for visually. I know that he likes it, and it's also important that it's not someone who doesn't want to do it but does it because wants to help you. But I think he enjoys it. Some years ago he mentioned when he was driving and he said, yeah, and when I was 18 I almost became an actor. And that's when I thought, okay, I'll ask you something at some point. It was before he had the first part in What Do We See. But because before, I don't know if I would have thought about it, but that's how things happen. Like I think if we didn't go to, I don't know where we're going, and some dialogue brought us to this moment when he mentioned it only once I'm 40, and in 40 years he only mentioned once that he wanted to be an actor as a teenager. And this brought me the idea to work with him. I think without that, there would have been no co-working, no Dry Leaf, I wouldn't be here. I don't know, yeah.
More questions? There, and then we'll come down here, yeah.
Hey, good afternoon. In my place, your name is Alexandre. You know, I'm Brazilian. I'm Gus. I'm film director, and I'd like to know from you is if you think of your films to be seen by people who doesn't know at all about your culture, and also people who are from your culture. You know, the difference between these audiences.
Well, I can't say, thank you, that I think about that while making a film. But of course, when it's done, it's and you know the film will be screened there and here. It becomes a subject to think about. I can't say that it was necessarily think with Dry Leaf or the film before, because with my first film, Let the Summer Never Come Again, somehow it proved for me that a work, if you do it, I don't know, with open heart, it's for everyone. And somehow it proved for me. I think in the moment when something won't work at some place. It won't be a geographical problem, but rather than something happened with me. And as long it's a sincere work, it should be open for everyone. Today was a first screening in Georgia. And because of big time difference and so on, the whole day I was like, come on, didn't it finish? Why is nobody writing to me? Like, and at some point, because I didn't know like when they start exactly and when should I expect that it's finished. But I was very curious because all my friends saw it today for the first time. At some point I got a few nice messages and I was like, okay, it worked.
Are New Yorkers your biggest fans?
Sorry?
Are New Yorkers your biggest fans?
Maybe they have still to prove them, but it's good to be here.
Challenge accepted. Over here.
For your future career, would you like to concentrate on specific genre or specific topics, as a target for your career, or do you want to explore totally different things, different genres, and take risks and totally different things?
Can we also take the other question, just so, because we have to wrap up after that? Over there, you had a hand up? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about, Mark mentioned the process of using 16 millimeter. I want to talk about, is there something about the process of shooting with the Sony Ericsson that drew you, that guided you, or was it mostly an aesthetic kind of thing you were going for, or did you have a lot of familiarity with using it in the past? Thanks.
I'll just repeat both questions since it's a bit loud. So the lady over here asked if there are specific genres or topics you're looking to tackle. And the gentleman over there about whether there was something about the process of shooting on a Sony Ericsson that attracted you, or was it just an aesthetic choice?
Well, I think you never know what is a risk, because you may think that I'll go a safe way, but exactly that can be much more risky. I don't know. For me, filmmaking is, I think, the more or less only thing where I don't think about safety, because like all the other things, I don't know, crossing a street or anything, I follow as it should be. Mostly I don't question how things should happen, but I think everyone has to have like at least one thing when you forget about everything and just work or just do what you want. So for me, it always happens differently than I planned. This film is completely different than I thought it would be, and knowing that now planning the next film, I know I can plan and plan and plan, but still it will be different in the end. And it was really nice to find peace with this this thought that because I know that there are people who struggle not to achieve exactly what was imagined, and I also respect people who really try to make 100% something they really wanted. I mean, so many great artists or filmmakers go this way. For me, it's different. For me, there is I try to find the balance between like a childish wish to I want this way. On one hand, on the other hand, it can be completely different, and still it will be nice. And Sony Ericsson, yeah. For me, it in the first place, it's an aesthetic decision. It's for me, it was the first encounter with beauty I made. It, but just for me, it was first time I made a picture with it, and I really liked it. And it was first time in my life that I made something I liked. Because before I was not making pictures, but everything I made was And I cooked, and it was once I tried to make a chair as a kid, and it didn't work. Like I don't know. Maybe some people would tell me, okay, this is good, but I didn't like it. And this was really like first time making something and thinking it's beautiful. So it really gave me a lot of energy in that sense.
That's really beautifully put. Now I'm thinking of what's the first thing I ever made that I thought was a thing of beauty. So we'll wrap on that thought. Thank you so much, Alexandre, for